So I grew up in Honesdale, Pennsylvania. We were a small town, but with 5,000 people, we were actually the largest town in our county. And there were a lot of things that our county had. We had more cows than people and more deer than cows. But artists? The first time I remember seeing an artist, it actually wasn't in Honesdale. It was 3 hours away. It was my birthday, and we drove into New York City to see Sandy Duncan playing Peter Pan on Broadway. As a 7-year-old boy, I think I was probably more excited about the Sardi's cheesecake we had before the show, or maybe by all the pirates who were in it. But looking back from now, it's the artists who are the most important part of that night. I remember understanding for the first time what an artist was, that Sandy Duncan was on a stage playing a role in front of an audience. That night and that realization pretty much set me on the path that my life has taken. After that night, I eventually returned to New York City to kiss Amanda Peet. Well, I actually came to study theater, but I got to kiss Amanda Peet on stage. In order to pay for school and stay in the city, I took a job in fundraising. And that job led me to the New York Philharmonic, the Museum of Modern Art, the National Endowment for the Arts, and now, ArtPlace America. So that night was undeniably important to me. But that night also taught me something wrong, a lesson that would take me some 30 years to realize was a mistake. That night taught me that artists are people who live far away. There's something about that word artist that a lot of people find foreign. They see artists as others, as people who don't live in Honesdale. A colleague of mine was doing some research for the Urban Institute, and she went into communities and she asked them, "Who are your artists?" Time and again she was told, "Oh, we don't have any of those here." But Maria knew that wasn't true because she was visiting communities that were alive with music and singing and dancing. But no one used that word, artist. This summer, I was in Aspen, Colorado, and I was moderating a panel with Dennis Scholl from the Knight Foundation. At one point, Dennis looked out at the audience and he said, "Who here is a golfer?" About 2/3 of the hands went up. He said, "Who here is a tennis player?" Same number of hands were in the air. But when he asked, "Which of you is an artist?" no one raised their hand. Dennis looked out at the audience and he said, "I've seen most of you play, and I'm guessing that you're probably better artists." I don't know why it is that we can so easily see ourselves on a continuum with Serena Williams or Tiger Woods, but we don't think that anything we do has anything in common with Sandy Duncan. I mean, thinking back to Honesdale, our neighbor was a cartoonist whose comics were published by Marvel Comics. I took recorder lessons from a woman who performed in a Baroque ensemble. My father, he got to play the rabbi in a production of Fiddler on the Roof. But not one of them was called an artist. I believe the disconnect is serious, and I believe it's deep, and I believe it comes from the fact that many of us do not know where art comes from. A group of foundations commissioned some national research. They discovered that 96% of Americans value the role of art in their lives. 96%. 27% value artists. That research led to the creation of United States Artists, which took as its tagline, "Art comes from artists." It's good, right? As Alice Water knows better than any of us, this is a disconnect that the food world has also had to deal with. I mean, when I was growing up, I thought that steak came from the A&P. I didn't understand it had anything to do with all of those cows. But the food world has successfully made this connection. And today we eat local, our restaurants are farm to table, and we know our farmers know our food. I think this is exactly what we need to do with artists. We need to understand that art comes from artists. And we need to understand that artists are our neighbors. They live, work, and play just like the rest of us. So, what is possible if we learn to recognize that artists are some of the people in our neighborhood? Well, the chairman of the NEA and the president of the Ford Foundation wanted to find out. So they pulled together the presidents of some of the largest foundations in the country to wrestle with this very question. Those presidents walked into that room knowing that the typical arts conversation in this country is framed only around what the arts do not have: money. right? We open with our lack, and we spend every conversation with our hand out. These presidents wanted to see what would happen if we tried the opposite. What would happen if we led with our abundance, with the thing that we do have? And that's artists. Artists are the one asset that exists in every community. Not every community has a waterfront. Not every community has strong public transportation. Not every community is lucky enough to be anchored by a hospital or a major university. But every community has people who sing and dance and tell stories. In 2009, the National Endowment for the Arts introduced a new phrase to the country. It's creative placemaking. And creative placemaking was simply meant to capture the ways that artists can help shape the social, physical, and economic characters of their communities. It was a back formation. Planners here will recognize that it refers to the work of Jane Jacobs and William White and simply adds creative to their arsenal of placemaking interventions. Now, the phrase was new, but not the concept. In Lascaux, our Paleolithic ancestors inscribed the boundaries of their communities with images of their collective experience. In ancient Greece, the theater was not only the physical center of its community, it was also the social, civic, and religious center. And this Hudson Opera House that we're all in today, it served its community as a theater, but also as a city hall, a library, a bank, and a jail. Bank and jail. So why did we need a new phrase for work that was at least as old as recorded history? Well, it fundamentally repositions the arts. It talks about what the arts bring to the table, not what they lack. It doesn't ask what a community should do for the arts. It asks what can the arts do for their community. And it positions art and culture as a core sector of community planning and development, right alongside housing, transportation, public safety, and open space. And that means that we need to be prepared to talk about the arts in the language of mayors and city planners. And that's no stretch. Take foot traffic. It's one of the most important things for someone who's concerned about public safety or local economies. And it happens to be a natural byproduct of the arts. An opera house might have 500 people walk into it at 8 o'clock. If the director's done their job well, those 500 people will stay and walk out together at 10 o'clock. That's great, but that's only 2 hours of the day. A museum, on the other hand, might have 500 people walk in and out over the course of a day. And rehearsal studios might have a dozen people in and out every hour. Cluster these together, and you begin driving 12, 14, even 16 hours of positive foot traffic. Eyes to keep us safe, but also wallets that need to buy lunch or a newspaper or a train ticket. And that brings us to the economy. Last year, for the first time ever, the federal government calculated what art adds to the economy every year. The Bureau of Economic Analysis calculated that art and cultural production has a unique value add of $504 billion to GDP every year. That's serious dollars. So foot traffic is great, and so is adding to the economy. But there are lots of other things that do this, and some may do it in bigger numbers than the arts. Take a stadium or a big box store, for instance. So why do we also need the arts in community development? Because the arts do something that those other sectors don't. The arts help drive more stable communities. Gallup, the national polling organization, decided to investigate what makes someone call a place their home, what makes them put their roots down. The top 3 drivers of community attachment were social offerings, openness, and aesthetics. In other words, the arts. An anthropologist in Chicago studied the informal arts, the kind of things that are more likely to be a part of our everyday lives, like singing in a church choir or acting in that community theater production of Fiddler. She found that people who participate in these activities together both reinforce their individual identity, but they also forge a group solidarity. And the social bonds that are formed last well beyond when the drumming circle is over. Those people use those connections to navigate the city for the rest of their lives. A UCLA professor took a look at low socioeconomic status students across this country. These are some of the most at-risk youth in our country. He found that these students who had high arts exposure were more likely to vote, more likely to volunteer, and more likely to participate in student and local government. People who participate in the arts are more likely to participate in civic activities beyond the arts. So let's review. Artists are the one asset that exists in every community. Artists drive foot traffic and help the economy, just like other sectors. And artists do something that other sectors don't do as well. They drive stable communities through community attachment, social cohesion, and civic engagement. Plus, they're fun. But you've got to be asking yourself, does this actually work? I mean, can artists literally shape the social, physical, and economic character of a place? You bet. Just visit Providence, Rhode Island during one of their water fires. Or go down to Miami and take a walk through the Wynwood Arts District pretty much any day of the week. Or, better yet, stay right here in Hudson and wait for December when it's their annual winter walk. Artists not only can help shape the social, physical, and economic future of places, we need them to. Why? Because without the arts, community planning and development is just going to focus on building beds and baths. But we deserve more. We need more. The time has come to add artists to community development and make it bed, bath, and beyond. Thank you very much.